Hello, my name is Ben Jenkins. How are you? That's a really big response. It wasn't words, it was just a noise, but that's fine. You're medical students. Welcome, my name is Ben Jenkins. Would you please welcome to the stage Zoe and Osher Günsberg? Yes! So me and Zoe run a thing called Story Club. Osher is a part of Story Club and has been for a long time. You've hosted a couple, have you not? One. There you go. We've been doing this for about 8 or 9 years. We've got to jump right into it. Basically, for those of you who don't know what we do, we ask people like Osher to come and tell true stories from their lives while sitting in a chair reading out of this, frankly, enormous book. The only rules are they have to be true and they have to be around a theme that we pick. And because we're doing it for you guys, we thought that a really nice theme that we can tell is just loose stories about health and mental health. And of course, the trade-off of getting someone like Osher to come and tell a true story about his life, is that me and Zoe also have to do it. So I'm going to start us off with a story about mine, and then we're going to hear from Zoe, and then we're going to hear from Osher. That is all the housekeeping. Are you ready? Now, sorry, we started the show in a pub at a uni bar, and it's kind of kept that flavour ever since. So it's very strange doing it to a room full of quite intelligent and sober people. So let's, soberish.
They've been going for 4 days. They're not sober.
Yeah. So let's see how this goes. So this is my story. So a few months ago, I told my therapist that my biggest fear was not being accepted by people, being ostracised or worse, hated. Which was odd, because this certainly was never the case when I was a kid. I never cared about that stuff. Now, it is extremely inaccurate to suggest that at the age of 12, I had no friends, because I had one friend. And while that's not a lot of friends, I'll be the first to admit, it's not no friends, and that is a fact. It is, of course, possible to argue that while I had friend, I did not in fact have friends, plural, but this seems like you're playing needless semantics, and besides, not a kind thing to point out to a 12-year-old, least of all one with only one friend. I mean, come on. My mother worried about this. One friend, to her thinking, was an entirely inappropriate number of friends to have. She'd say things like, "I'm worried you're just putting all your eggs in the one basket." The basket here in this metaphor, the basket in this metaphor was my friend Paul, and she was concerned that he was hoarding, I suppose, my friendship eggs. To Mum's way of thinking, my friendship portfolio needed to be diversified to safeguard against any unexpected movement in the market value of Paul. And it's tempting to ascribe reasons for my only having one friend. Some have certainly tried since, and by some I mean largely my siblings. My affinity for magic tricks is often floated as a possible cause. A clawing demand to be the centre of attention is another one. The fact that until I was 13, this is true, I refused to wear underpants, only Speedos. Now, this probably wasn't known by anybody at the time, but it still speaks to other, more noticeable problems. The fact was, though, I was perfectly happy with only having one friend, which I know is the sort of thing you expect to hear from someone who only has one friend, but honestly, I didn't see the issue, and I took a quantity over quality approach. Quality over quantity approach. See, we used to be able to get the shit past them. They're too fucking sharp to this whole thing. Now, it was true that if Paul wasn't at school one day, then lunch would be a fairly lonely event, but in those instances were rare enough, and who doesn't like a nice, quiet sit in the library with a Garfield anthology anyway? But it still gnawed at Mum. One night, she told me that when she was little, she had no friends at a new school, and so she bought a big bucket of KFC and walked around the playground offering people chicken if she could sit with them. And, there being no takers, was forced to sit and eat a bucket of fried chicken by herself. This was likely intended as a comfort, but it remains the saddest thing she or anyone else has ever told me. Now, this might have explained why she was so concerned for me, haunted as she was by the memory of that greasy-fingered loneliness, but for whatever reason, it stewed in her. And so one day she sat me down and she told me that she'd booked me into a course. And this, in and of itself, didn't set off any alarm bells. It may surprise you to learn, given what you know already, that at 12 I was extremely fond of taking courses in things. I'd quite recently done one, in fact, on forensic science, and earlier that year, one on pottery, where I'd made an extremely structurally unsound ashtray for my parents who did not smoke. What kind of course? I asked. Now, here there was a pause. It's a course, my mum said, centered around, and here there was another slightly longer pause. It's a course about making friends. Now, of all the pauses that I've already mentioned, the one that followed was the longest. So, that'll be nice, she said, and put her hands in her lap. So hang on, I asked, after a fashion. You want me to make friends at this course? No, darling. You don't make friends at this course. Although, she said, suddenly excited, I suppose you could. It's a course that teaches you how to make friends. Right. Mum? Yes. This sounds like a very bad thing, and I don't want to do it. But I did. Couldn't tell you why I did it, other than it seemed like something that my mother really wanted me to do. And so, not wanting to upset her, I climbed into her Tarago and we drove in silence to the community centre. It'll be nice, she said, and I could tell that this was far more for her benefit than mine, and that in the intervening days since booking the course, she had begun to form her own doubts. If you don't like it, she told me as we pulled up to the car park, you don't have to go tomorrow. Got out of the car and walked into the building where the course on how to make friends was taking place. Now, for those of you whose mothers did not make them go to a course for making friends, this might not be immediately apparent, but walking into such a course is instantly completely horrible. You are sharing a space with people who are either experiencing a true nadir in their lives or aren't doing that, which is probably equally bad. There were maybe 15 of us all milling around, and get this, when the one thing that unites a group of people is an inability to make friends, the small talk does not sparkle. There was a station at the side of the room where you could get biscuits and cordial, which I gravitated toward because I felt that I needed to do something with my hands. And, by the way, this is a belief I still hold to this day, shoveling biscuits in your mouth is a fine and noble thing to do with your hands. I was approached by a kid wearing a Space Jam t-shirt. Would I, he asked, like to know some facts about Space Jam? Now, I already knew a fair bit about Space Jam, but I said, sure, and over the next 10 minutes received a truly astonishing amount of information about that film. When he was done dispensing this information, he wordlessly walked away. The lady running the course arrived and told us to find a seat. She wore the kind of extremely large resin jewellery that you see exclusively on kindergarten teachers and at the Sydney Writers' Festival. She began by asking us to go around the group and say our names and something about ourselves. A lot of people owned turtles. The group then received some facts about Space Jam, all of which I'd already heard. And we discovered, one way or another, that everybody at the course believed they were not meant to be there. After introductions, we leapt straight into the course. The curriculum of Friends 101 was broad and covered topics from listening to other people to the importance of asking questions and interesting ways to introduce yourself to people. One way, this is true, that was suggested was to say your name and then a suggestion for how they could remember it. My name is Tim. I've got dark skin like a Tim Tam. Was suggested by Tim. And while this is a demonstrably insane way to introduce yourself to someone, the fact that I still remember Tim's name almost 20 years later speaks to the undeniable efficacy of this technique. Any Tims? The rest of the day didn't improve. Over lunch, 15 islands dotted around the community centre, silence, but for the almost imperceptible noise of sandwiches carefully being eaten. I thought about leaving, but abandoned the idea on the grounds that Mum would be extremely cross and probably sad. And that cross-sad combo is one that I didn't want to deal with. And so I stayed. And after lunch, there was more of the same. Hobbies are a thing that people like talking about. Don't tell people they're fat. Question, yes, even if they are fat. Actually, especially if they're fat. Introduction to the inside voice. And at 3 o'clock, I climbed back into the Tarago with tears in my eyes and begged Mum not to have to go back. I really was, I told Mum, happy with just one friend. And I've changed on that since. I think most of us do when we grow up. A few months ago, and I think this is about where we all came in, I told my therapist that I think my biggest fear is not being accepted by people, being ostracized or worse, hated. And he took off his glasses and he sat them down on the arm of his chair and he said to me, and this man, by the way, used to be an engineer before going into psychiatry and so approaches this sort of thing with the calm detachment of building a rail bridge. And he said to me, well, Ben, there are all sorts of interesting evolutionary reasons for why you feel that. There was a time where being rejected by our tribe would result in a certain death, that we'd lose their protection, be left behind and wouldn't be able to defend for ourselves. They'd be, just to use an example, Ben, devoured by wolves. These days, though, I think you'll have to agree with me that a person can be more or less universally despised by everyone in their life, completely cut off, and live to an old age. At the time, it felt unhelpful. But now, looking back, it does make me think how lucky I was for even a brief moment in my life to be happy with that, without fear of loneliness or being devoured by wolves. Thank you. Thank you. We podcast this show, not this show, we podcast the show that we do elsewhere, and I did this story a little while ago, and my mum wasn't in the audience to see it, and I put it out on the podcast not thinking, and I got a phone call like the next hour as I put it online from Mum, and she was just like, I am so sorry! Anyway, welcome. Thank you so much. You are such a wonderful audience. The next storyteller co-founded Story Club with me back when we were at university. She's wonderful. She's written a book called Almost Sincerely. You can see her on the checkout, among other myriad shows like The Book Show and upcoming and shows that we probably can't mention, but they're there. So would you please welcome to this very special Story Club, Zoe Norton Lodge.
Thank you, Ben. You guys hear me okay? 3 of you can hear me, that's good. One chilly winter morning, I woke up from the slumber of a 20-year-old who has the world at her feet, but for some reason works at a discount menswear store. I pondered unfondly on the day that stretched out before me of selling cheaply made suits to men who probably shouldn't be proposing to their girlfriends. I somehow fought my unyielding body and dragged my carcass out of bed to face my fate. Just before I got to the kitchen to fix myself a breakfast of whatever the opposite of champions are, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror in the hallway. How interesting, I thought, as I gazed upon my face. The right side of my face looks normal, and the left side of my face looks like a basset hound. I touched it, expecting it to be extremely tender, but it was rather more like poking a raw steak, a cold, dead steak. I did a quick search of my brain to ascertain where this fit in the scheme of things my face should look like. I had on occasion awoken to realise that I had in fact fallen asleep on a corduroy cushion and then discovered in the looking glass a face blotted with deep and squiggly red lines. This was somewhat like that if following that event someone had shot me in the left side of my face with a tranquilizer dart. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a bowl of cornflakes. I sat down to eat them, and as I pushed a silvery spoon quivering with milk and flakes into my mouth, I thought, how interesting. Usually, when I perform this rudimentary task, the cornflakes manage to remain in my mouth before embarking on a mysterious journey through my insides. They don't dribble slowly out onto the dining room table, making a very sad, clumpy puddle of white and orange gunk. But my mouth couldn't close. Try as I might, the left side of my mouth just gaped slowly in and out, never fully opening or closing like a dying fish. My sister, who was 14 at the time and had no understanding of what it meant to toil at a discount menswear store, came into the room. "Zoe," she said as she gazed upon me and the mess I was still in the process of making on the floor. "That's unusual," I thought as I watched her eyes widen in horror. "My sister doesn't usually look at me like I'm dying." "Zoe, your face is broken." In comes Mama. Oh, Mama, I thought. She'll bring a needed air of calmness and perhaps a fitting explanation for the previous circumstances. Mama knows what's what. That's weird, I thought, as Mama took a step back from me, gasped, and then burst into tears. Mama doesn't usually behave like she's just watched 10 puppies get stabbed when she comes to join me for a bowl of morning cornflakes. She ran out of the room and dialed the doctor. Then she marched me, still in my pyjamas, down the street to our local GP. I sat in the waiting room amongst a bunch of coughing old ladies and elderly men in grey woolen waistcoats who farted and read various useless inserts from the paper that had been discarded by previous patients. Occasionally one or another would look up at me and their glances would linger on my face. That's odd, I thought. It's usually I gazing upon these citizens of the community with a mixture of pity and dread, and it seems the tables have fucking turned. Then my turn came. The doctor came out. "Zoe," she said, looking at me and then immediately looking down at her clipboard, "right this way." Hi. It seems half my face is broken," I told the doctor as I sat down in the little white room adorned with crayon pictures and photos of toddlers. She pulled out a packet of baby wipes and considered my face with mild disgust and pity, like a pigeon that's been run over by a bicycle. Not quite dead, but certainly not quite right. "I think you have Bell's palsy." "What's that?" "No one really knows." "Well, is there anything I can do?" "Take steroids." "Well, what will they do?" "Look, probably nothing, but they will make you put on quite a lot of weight. In that sense, it's a bit like, steroids are a bit like 50 Big Macs, I suppose. Is there anything else I should know? Well, you'll need to buy an eye patch. Why? Because your left eye will weep a constant stream of tears until this goes away. And when will it go away? Who can say? Could be a month, could be 7 years. I left the doctor's surgery with a prescription for painkillers, which I definitely didn't need, but I dutifully took, because when science tells me I'm allowed drugs, I'm at her mercy. At the chemist, I also bought my eye patch, which I found out soon after would be my best friend if one's best friend made them look like a really sad pirate. As a 20-year-old, I had until that very morning been skipping merrily down the same path of experimentation as my friends. Then 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. When my friends learned that men can be cruel, I learned that sometimes when you go into a shop, people feel sorry for you and give you stuff for free. My friends were in Cancun and I was in a fucking Kafka story. I quickly learned the following about Bell's palsy. It makes half your face look like Salvador Dali's melting clocks. Doctors don't know fuck all about it, but they'll chemically fatten you while you have it because there's a character building exercise somewhere in the Hippocratic Oath. Oh, there we go. Bell's palsy makes people look at you like you're a baby duckling with a sprained ankle who also has rabies and who should stay the fuck away from their children. Tissues are your constant bedfellow due to the Bell's palsy mouth maxim, what goes in must definitely dribble out. I tried my best to maintain a normal Sex and the City inspired social life. On Friday night, I go out for drinks with my girlfriends. Vanessa would tell us how the Chilean bartender downstairs just asked for her number, and I tell the gang about Mama crying while watching me try to drink through a straw. Of all the people in my life, myself included, Mama was the most upset by my new face. She even took it upon herself to do some internet research. She had discovered a PDF created by some university in Europe with some helpful advice on how to rehabilitate people with Bell's palsy. It included things like forcing yourself to chew with the affected side of your mouth, trying to whistle, and of course, trying to drink through a straw. If I'd bothered to look it up myself, I'm reasonably confident that I would have discovered that the PDF had in fact been created by the mean older brother of someone with Bell's palsy for attempting to undertake all those tasks was in equal measures demeaning and impossible. Formerly at the discount menswear store, I had struggled to move the acres of polyester t-shirts emblazoned with willfully awful slogans like 1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila floor. But my new face, which was essentially half a wheel of brie that had been left out in the sun, dressed up as a pirate, seemed to evoke a level of pity which induced people to give us money. My canny manager recognised my newfound salesmanship and paraded me around the store like a curious street beggar. She even took me off my probation, which meant upgrading my uniform from a polo shirt that said Trish on the pocket to one that said Zoe on the pocket. My new shirt filled me with pride and philosophy. I began to become surprisingly self-reflective and ponderous for a sexually excitable 20-year-old girl. So, Bell's palsy. This was going to be my thing. It wasn't great, but it could have been worse. I could have been one of those people with an annoying affectation, like always carrying around a ukulele. It probably didn't bode well for my already fruitless attempts to acquire a mate through the tried and tested method of never making eye contact with a man. Cheerfully, things were so barren in that department that this turn of events surely couldn't make things worse. Perhaps I could even garner a sympathy vote from a biology student, I thought, hopefully. I even briefly attempted a gym regimen. Each workout would leave a deep and lasting purple legacy all over my face for at least 2 hours. Also, each session seemed to bring my breasts 1 inch closer to my knees, and I already had enough problems in the arena of sagging, so I swapped the gym for drinking myself into a blissful oblivion. The days and months passed, and the leaves turned from green to brown to rot, just like the left side of my face. And I grew fatter in dribbling self-acceptance. My friends got used to my expanding form and constantly having to pass me napkins to wipe away the litres of Long Island iced tea dribbling down my shirt. I even managed on one occasion to lure a drunk man who probably had a thing for pirates back into my spiderweb. And one day, in this state of inner peace, I walked into a Gloria Jean's to buy a coffee. "No!" a man screamed as I approached the counter. I was used to pity, but never before had my face provoked a response of unbridled terror in a fully grown adult. And I shot him the most severe dirty look I was capable of. I went to leave, and then time froze. I couldn't move. My feet were melding into the floor. Either I was having a night terror or Bell's palsy had migrated to my feet. I did an inventory of my surroundings. The lights were off. There was no pastries in the darkened counter. I looked back to the entranceway and I could see my own footprints. Was I going mad? I started to feel sick, like my lungs were filling with chemicals, which they definitely were. "What have you done?" screamed the screaming man, with the singular devastation of someone who had mere moments before finished several days' work varnishing the floor of a brand new Gloria Jean's, and had now watched helplessly on as someone walked in and completely fucked his shit in an instant. I looked at him, and he looked at me. I started to try to run, but very slowly, like the sticky Pompeii victim I had become, and gradually progressed away from the screaming man who, save from a fist shaking in the air, dared not move lest he make things worse. I got outside and tried to walk away casually, although my sticky footprints leading directly back to the scene of the crime made travelling incognito a challenge. So I called Mama, who drove over and picked me up from a short and sticky distance away from the incident. We were stopped in the car at a set of lights, and Mama looked at me and started crying. Great. This is just what I need for my fucking inner peace. "Your mouth?" she said. "I know. No, it looks a bit more normal." I looked in the passenger mirror. It wasn't exactly a TV Week smile, but there might have been some movement at the station. I looked at Mama again. Do you think it's better?" She considered me for a moment and then started crying again. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. It's still the same." "Well, fuck," I said. And I wound down the window and put my face to the wind, and I just let it flap about however it wanted to. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you ever want to come to Story Club outside of this conference, we do it on the first Monday of every month at the Giant Dwarf Theatre. Our last story for today comes from the wonderful Osher Günsberg, who, as Ben mentioned, is a really important part of the Story Club family, and this is just a really beautiful story, and so I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Osher, please.
Thank you, Zoe. That was great.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Beauty. Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. The Australian Medical Students Association, eh? Come here from all over Australia to mingle, discounted rates for the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners, and possibly find a future spouse. Or, if my experience with both of my parents is anything to go by, line up a lifetime supply of dexamphetamines and benzos. Oh yeah, but the trick is to get the pharmacist on side too. Thanks, Mum and Dad. Maybe you're doing both. That'll make Luna Park fun. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Osher Günsberg. I work on radio, I work on the telly, and sometimes I count roses. But not today. No, I'm very grateful to be here, and I'd like to tell you a story that Zoe and the team at Story Club invited me to tell about a year ago. And it's a story that's gone on to have a life of its own, and the people who organised this asked me specifically to come here and tell you this story today. So, it's a story about the day that I lost my mind. Now, I'd told people before that I'd lost my mind, but I didn't really know what I was talking about. Like, there was one time that I danced on stage with a band called the Flaming Lips. I was wearing a giant koala suit, and next to me was Drew Barrymore in a giant bee suit, and her boyfriend, the hot drummer from The Strokes, was dancing next to her in a giant kangaroo suit. I was so excited, I was like, wow, I lost my mind! I didn't know what I was talking about. I hadn't really lost my mind at all. I was just really, really excited. And drunk. And so fucking high. Actually, someone, just before I came on stage, someone tweeted a photo of what I looked like at that big day out. I was like, wow, there you go. And now I know why I was that skinny. Anyway, no, the day I'm talking about was something completely different altogether. It was my younger brother's birthday. It was just over 3.5 years ago, February 21st, 2014, sorry. I was living alone in Venice Beach, California. I'd been there for about 9 years at this point. And I woke up after a really bad night. I'd managed about 4 hours of fitful sleep, which unfortunately had become the norm for me. It had been about 9 months since I'd come off my medication under the supervision of my doctor. He'd observed that I'd been doing quite well managing my mental health, and we both thought that I could at least try life without my meds. So instead, I tried using mindful meditation, a disciplined routine of diet and exercise. These things were really helping me keep things in check. You see, a few years beforehand, I'd been diagnosed with social phobia and generalised anxiety, which meant that I was morbidly terrified of everyone and everything. Shit. I've been on meds for a while because the way I'd been managing things had stopped working for me. See, like any other red-blooded Australian male, I'd been managing my anxiety with alcohol. Yeah, you laugh now. Because what happens, I'll tell you what happened to me, the amount that I had to drink to feel anywhere near normal got more and more, and eventually I had to stop drinking altogether, but that's a story for another time. First Monday of every month, the Giant Dwarf. My 9 months off meds had been pretty good at first. My initial experiences of dating after divorce were a lot easier because now my world was no longer numbed or blunted by medication as I began to feel the first tingles in my tummy again as I met someone that I clicked with. Also, sex off medication, which was sapping my testosterone, was pretty good. Oh, it works! I got a round of applause too. But soon enough, I was having more bad days than good, more bad days than I'd cared to admit. I was lucky if I got 4 hours of sleep a night, and I was ill-prepared to deal with anything other than my regular routine, which inevitably happened in a big way. On Tuesday of the week in question, I had an anxious call with my then manager back in Australia. Network 10 still hadn't rolled over my bachelor contract, which left me technically unemployed and paying my rent out of my savings in a foreign country. So on Wednesday of that week, the following day, the smoking hot Argentinian girlfriend that, well, she wasn't really my girlfriend. We'd had a torrid holiday love affair, right? She waited until after I'd booked my flights to Bogota to tell me, oh, no, don't bother coming, I'm back with my boyfriend. But she texted to me on Facebook. The next day, which is a Thursday, I got a call from my older brother informing me that my aging father had ended up in ICU back in Brisbane with a severe chest infection and that I should be on standby to fly back at a moment's notice. All of this added stress piled up in my subconscious and was just waiting to explode into reality. So, Friday, 21st of February, 2014. I was working on helping my bowels do their thing by drinking a nice cup of coffee in the morning, like I normally do. I was reading the New York Times on my iPad every morning, like I normally do. And I read the weather, like I read every morning, like I normally do. And next to the weather, like they did every morning, it said, oh, by the way, the last month was the 345th consecutive warmest month ever recorded. Now, I don't know what it was, but while reading that, something in my brain absolutely burst open and pure, white, hot fear just came pouring out of me. Now, anxiety isn't just fear. Anxiety is fear of fear. And this became a chain reaction that was quickly approaching meltdown. The physical symptoms were awful enough, yet nothing I hadn't experienced before. But what was happening inside my brain was utterly and purely horrible. In 1 minute, I'd gone from, oh, that's a concern, to, holy shit, climate change is going to cause a global cataclysm that breaks down society as we know it. Today, the seas are going to rise. Today, anarchy will rule. Today, millions will perish. Today, and I am the only person that knows about this. So I tried my regular breathing exercises. I tried writing down my CBT bullshit, trying to make it all work out. Tried to find rational responses to the irrational thoughts, but none of that was working. So I did what I normally do, which works every time. I went for a run. 10 kilometres down the beach was usually long enough to calm my brain and get the regular thoughts happening again. However, I wasn't even 100 metres down the path from my house when I lost the ability to realise that the thoughts I was having were no longer rational. Firstly, the visual delusions started. As I ran along the beach at Venice Beach, you've seen photos of it or you've been there, there's all these big palm trees. And as I ran along there, I looked up and I saw the canopy of the palm trees. The stalks became like an underwater kelp forest. And the canopy of the palms formed some sort of perverse water lily formation on what was now the new sea level 10 metres above my head. My brain then went into like a hyper-alert state, trying to make sense of everything, trying to tie everything I saw back to the thing that I was terrified of. I saw cars going by, and I just reeled in horror at these people driving these vehicles that were causing the pollution that was going to bring about our destruction today, and they didn't give a shit. 2 women were walking by with disposable coffee cups. Didn't they know their coffee was probably flown in from far away? Have they no idea of the carbon footprint of their freaking beverage? Didn't they realise how many trees had died to make those cups? They didn't care. What about the ecosystem that would be destroyed by the landfill those cups went into? My brain just wouldn't stop. How come I was the only person that was worried about these things? The running wasn't making anything better, so I kept going regardless. Until I saw a young father in his 20s who had a beautiful, pudgy, fresh out of the oven baby, asleep in a baby Bjorn on his front. The dad was walking along in the sunshine and I got him to sleep all by myself. It was all I could do to not grab him by the shoulders and scream at him, don't you know the world is going to end today? What are you doing bringing new life into a world that will be at the same time underwater, at fire, and at war over resources? What the fuck were you thinking? Thankfully for him, I knew enough to turn around and get back to my house before I got too close to him. Something was very wrong with me and I needed to be safe back in my house, preferably under my bed. Over the next kilometre of running, the ruminating, punishing thoughts of doom and horror started to come ever faster and more powerfully. It was like the backcountry scene in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, just without the mescaline. You remember when you were a kid and your brother or sister would walk up behind you when you were playing on the living room floor and flick you on the ear, and then by the time you'd swatted them away and run after, they had fucked off, and where did that come from? That's what it felt like. I began to flinch as the thoughts started to come through, and they felt like they were piercing my body. I began to swat at them in the air, trying in vain to physically imagine pushing these painful thoughts out of the way. I must have looked like I was being attacked by a swarm of sandflies at sunset. The pain I was feeling in my body was absolutely real, and like I'm sure you do when you stub a toe or something, I started to grunt and inhale breath through my teeth as each loop of fear shocked my body like I'd stuck a fork in a power plug. Now, up ahead of me on the path as I was running, I see this guy shuffling ahead of me. He was one of the, unfortunately, many local homeless population in Venice Beach. Now, where'd the fucking paper go? Oh, here it is. Sorry, I told them beforehand, no, I want to stick the pages in here so I can dramatically turn pages. And while I was doing that, I put the papers the wrong way around. So I'm running along the path. I see this guy ahead of me, this homeless guy ahead of me, right? He had a stain clearly visible from behind in his 3 sizes too big jeans. The stain was from peeing himself. He had no shoes on, he had no shirt on. He was shuffling along, and I'll never forget, he had a strange rectangle shaved into the corner of his head. As I got closer, I realised 2 horrible, horrible things. Number 1, he was about 10 years younger than I was, and he was completely in another world. And number 2, he was also grunting and swatting and flinching exactly like I was. The only difference, perhaps, between he and I was that I knew something was very, very wrong with my ability to perceive reality at that point. So I ran in my front door. Straight away, I called my shrink. Thankfully, he was able to see me that lunchtime. And when I was in his office, well, that's when I knew I was in real trouble. Because I told him, so Jeff, the world is ending, and I'm the only one that knows about it. And if you're smart, you'd pack up your family, you'd drive to the mountains, because the civil unrest that's going to tear Los Angeles apart will probably kick off around sunset. When he tried to explain to me that I was experiencing something called paranoid delusions, my first thought was, shit, he's in on this. He doesn't know about it either. Fuck, I'm really alone. But by the grace of God or Buddha or Prince or whoever it was that looks down upon me, I knew that if I was so sick that I didn't believe my shrink, I was going to be in real trouble. So I listened. He told me that neurosis is the pain caused when the brain is having trouble accepting what is happening in reality. A breakup, a major illness, the loss of someone close to you. And he told me that psychosis happens when the pain gets so great that in order to protect itself from the pain caused by reality, the brain simply reinterprets reality. Now, I wasn't having a full-blown psychotic episode, but I was right there in the room with psychosis. It was really, really scary. It was very hard to hold on to reality. And I knew that if I was to go any deeper into this, I might not come back. Brad, sorry, I called him Jeff before, his name was Brad. Jeff was the other guy. I've had a lot of doctors. Brad was the first of many doctors who all worked very hard to get me better. I got back on meds, then I got back on some more meds, and with a new diagnosis that added obsessive compulsive disorder to my list of talents, I got on even more meds. So here we are, 3.5 years later. I've come off all of the antipsychotics, which is great because they make you really fat. If you remember on Bachelor, Rosie Waterland giving me shit about wearing suits that were too tight, that's because they were tailored before I got on the meds, and they make you put on about 1 kilo a week. They stop you feeling crazy, but you get really fat really fast. But I've come to the acceptance that I just can't handle what's going on in my head on my own. It might be different for other people, but I need a certain amount of medication so that I can cope with the world. But life is pretty good now. I still have some PTSD from the days and weeks that followed that event, but it's because it went on for some time while I waited for the meds to kick in. It's not like when you take a Nurofen and it takes about half an hour. It takes about 6 weeks for this stuff to start to work. That were a shitty 6 weeks. I have a stunningly beautiful, smart, and kind wife that I was honest with about all this from the very start, from the day I met her, and she still married me. I have a gorgeous stepdaughter that sneaks up behind me and cupcakes me as a sign of affection. And I went from being unemployed to having 5 jobs, working with great people who are all passionate about what they do and doing only the very best work that they can. And look, I know that climate change is indeed very scary, and I can only do my part, and I just have to accept that while my brain may want me to do otherwise, I in fact cannot change global energy policy by myself. Now, I know I'm not alone in this room as someone who's been through what I've just described, but once I knew what it was like to go through that, I knew I had to start talking about it, because when people think of mental illness, they think of the homeless man that I passed on the jogging path. Stinking, absent, twitchy, kind of dangerous. But I was that guy. People don't think of the bloke on Bachelor, counting roses and directing helicopters. But that's what it looks like to live with mental illness. You're looking at it. But I could be that bloke again. And I could be that guy again if I didn't listen to my doctors. But I do have to listen to my doctors. I also have to believe my wife when she hugs me and tells me that everything's okay. Thank you. Big hi. Joel!
All right, thanks guys.
No worries.
So that's all we have time for. So could I get another round of applause for Ben and Zoe?
Thank you.
Thanks. And we're just going to do a little Q&A.
Thank
That's
you.
all right.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
sure.
So let's just move the chair back a little bit.
Do you want the book?
No, I don't think we need the book.
This book was in a Peter Pan film at one point. Do you want it?
Nah, it's yours, keep it.
Wonderful. So guys, we have the live mics in the aisles, and if you have a question for Osher, please submit it on the app and I'll ask it for you.
There's an app?
Yeah, we have an app.
Do you swipe right? Oh, I can only imagine the routing you're doing. Have you been since last conference? Single? Boom!
So we called this session Ask Osher Anything. We agreed that there were no topics off the limits. And
You can ask anything you like. I may not answer.
Okay. This is being recorded, but we're happy to bleep out or edit things
There's
as
bleeping?
we need. Yes. So do we have a question at mic number 2?
Hi Osher, my name's Ed. I'm from University of Notre Dame, Sydney.
G'day, Ed.
Nice to meet you. Shannon Noel's a bit of a legend here at convention. My question is, what is Knowlesy really like?
Ed, that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked. For any history buffs, you'll appreciate Shannon Noel's nickname that we gave him. We like to call him Grassy. There you go. Took a little while. Grassy's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He's an absolutely charming human being. He always understood what he was getting into. He worked so hard. I think the first 3 years after Idol, he played like 250 shows a year on the road. So he's the nicest, most hardworking guy. He cops a lot of shit because people, I mean, he's younger than me? If it looks old, I don't know. He's a lovely bloke. He's a really great guy, and he's the kind of guy, Ed, that if you said, hey, Shannon, I've got to move house, can you help out? He'd be like, yeah, mate, sure, I know.
We had a follow-up question on the app.
Yeah.
Was Shannon robbed?
Was Shannon robbed?
Okay, we're going to take
No.
those comments.
Shannon Noel, I believe Shannon Noel was robbed.
There
at the Crazy Horse where they tried to charge his credit card for too much money, and that's what the fight was about.
Okay. Bit of a change of pace. This one, thank you so much for sharing your story. Did you experience any backlash in the industry or in your job for speaking publicly about your mental illness?
No, I didn't actually. It is always kind of, it's a bit odd as, you know, as anyone familiar with, let's say, for example, the feminist cause would be aware that microaggressions like, and I know this will, you know, be familiar to many people in the room, when someone says, oh, I saw a doctor about it, oh, what did he say? It's like, well, your fucking doctor could be a she, buddy. You know, the microaggressions that come along with gendered language, we seem to be more and more aware of, yet look at any news website today, you'll never believe this crazy this, or you'll never believe this insane that, or absolutely bonkers this. It's like, well, we've got to be careful about how we speak about that sort of thing. And so if anything, I've just personally become more aware of that kind of language and the way that we use, oh, it was absolutely mental. Well, can't really, you've got to be careful about how you say things because, you know, if you're dealing with something that you may not realise to feel marginalised and that might stop you from going to visit your GP is an issue. So, no, everyone's been pretty cool about it, but it was over a long period of time, and it was actually through Story Club that I started speaking out about it. They gave me the opportunity about a year ago to start talking about it, and that's where everything kind of came to from there. But I think it's an old story. The person that you know from the TV who comes out and talks about how they used to do drink and drugs and blah, 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 and now they've, you know, got this disorder and they take these meds. So I didn't quite want it to be that story again, so I've been trying to control how I say it and how I tell it. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Maloney?
Hi, Osher.
Hi.
Sorry about my voice, guys.
It's okay.
I've been going a bit
You've
too
been
hard this
partying
week.
for 4 days, that's fine.
I have two questions. Number one is, as a very well-known celebrity personality in Australia and beyond, do you think that a lot of people in the face of radio and TV suffer from stress and anxiety and other things and still present this facade for the camera? And if so, what are those stresses? How do you deal with them? Like the dynamic involving all of those things. My second question is probably a bit more personal. As medical students, we learn a lot about the theory of psychiatry as well as the rest of the stuff. We're told that there are a lot of precipitating and predisposing factors that make someone at a greater risk of anxiety and stress. You did mention a very, I guess, significant event that's happened in your life, but for us, we've been told that anxiety starts from a very early age, late teens, early 20s. Can you tell us a bit more about how it all happened and whether there was any, you know, trauma in your past, if you're happy to talk about it?
So that's the two great questions. I'll try and give quicker answers. I'll answer the second one first. Why? What did I miss?
No, you're all good.
What happened?
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Did I miss something?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I wear hearing aids, and sometimes when I miss things, I'm like, what the fuck? Everyone's laughing, and I don't know why. So to answer your second question first, the second question, yes, absolutely. I remember having like the world is ending panic attacks as young as 3, but it was the 70s. I absolutely dealt with this stuff from, you know, from when I was quite young, and like I mentioned, the first thing that made me not absolutely terrified to go out and be with people in a room was when I was 14 and I drank for the first time. I was like, oh, right, now I get why everyone's, oh, this is it. And unfortunately, it went from there. So yeah, absolutely, there are predispositions and yeah, it did get worse. And that's the thing that I would tell everyone is that sort it out, because by the time I was in my late 20s, like on Idol, for example, I would go 3 days without leaving the house because I was terrified. This is before I got diagnosed. I was just too afraid to leave the house. And it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until, when I was 40, and then everything just popped. To answer your first question about people in my industry having certain, what do you do to deal with things? It is an industry that attracts certain types of people, as doctors attracts certain type of people. Medical students have a similar. You're all the smartest person you've ever known. You're all the smartest person at your own high schools. Suddenly, you're in a room full of heaps of other smart people. My doctor at the time told me when I got diagnosed with OCD, he was also a doctor that dealt with like rugby players and wallabies and Olympians and things like that. And he said, I won't disclose, I'll make up a sport. This isn't the sport he mentioned. He said, there's a weightlifter that comes to see me, an Olympic weightlifter. Do you think for 1 second that this person would be able to perform the same 10-second group of movements thousands and thousands of times over an 8-year period for one event in Athens in 2004, unless they had some sort of obsessional tendency? I see it as somewhat of a superpower because I have this brain that absolutely positively will not stop until something's done. The worst part is that when the anxiety comes into that and it kind of turns that, that Alderaan destroying laser back at me, and then that's when it gets really horrible. So I would say absolutely, if you look at my industry, you'll definitely see, tendencies, just as, all like surgeons are all, not all, but psychopaths make great surgeons. Because they're able to detach from the whole scenario and go, oh yeah. I don't do that. That's unsanitary. One glove and the other. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Also, can I just say you're stunning for like 40 plus.
We've probably just got time for one more.
I'll tell my wife. I've got all the time in the world. I'll tell my wife.
One quick
I've got all the
question
time in the
from
world. What do you want to do?
And then one from number one. So this was from Salesh. What do you use for your hair?
Salesh, do you live in New South Wales? Do you live in Sydney? You live in Queensland. While you're here, go and see Aidan at Elizabeth Street, Darlinghurst. He's the one that cut my hair. And he uses a product made by a bloke called Rob. The trick is, Celeste, is marry a professional hair and makeup artist, then every day is a good hair day.
Okay, number two.
Hello, Osher.
Hi. What's your name?
Catherine.
G'day, Catherine.
I was wondering if for all the girls in the room, you could please repeat your rose line for us.
If we pull together, if we each put about $100 in, we might be able to afford the license fee that Warner Brothers would charge us. I'm sorry. It's a funny. I just had to think of some. Like anything, we replicate the format like we did with Idol, like you do with Survivor. You replicate the format from overseas, and it's just a really good line to use when it's like, "Sorry, ladies, Joel isn't into you. You two, you have to go now." It's a nice way to drop people. I mean, what else am I going to say? But guess he's not that into you. On your bike. In fact, I'll try that. I'll try that tomorrow night with Sophie. Well, because we're doing The Bachelorette at the moment. So Sophie's on at the moment. She's hilarious. Yeah, she's heaps fun. Sorry I couldn't answer your thing.
It's okay.
Okay, that's probably all we
Is that
have
it?
time for.
What? Look! They've been waiting! Just
Okay,
yell it out.
one more. Go for
Don't
it.
listen to Joel.
Do you want to just take a moment?
Oh my God.
It's all right. We're all waiting for you.
Okay, great. Are you waiting for me as well?
It's okay.
I'm a massive fan of The Bachelor.
Unreal. Me too.
Oh, great. We have something in common then.
We do.
Okay, I'm a really big fan of The Bachelor. I even watched during my HSC exams. I went to the library to catch it up on template and stuff, you know. I was just wondering, I had two questions actually, but one of them was, why is the first impression rose different color to The Bachelor and The Bachelorette? And in the last season of The Bachelorette, Fireman Cam is sort of like the perfect man, right? And my friends were enraged that he got eliminated, so we were just wondering if we could get some insider goss.
Okay, if you've never watched The Bachelor, there are roses, and on the first night of the big cocktail party, much like the party you'll have tomorrow night, there is a different coloured rose that you give to someone special, and that someone special has a special power, whether it be you get an extra helicopter or you get, I don't know, whatever. We change colours because we need to show to the viewers that it's different and special. Which colours we choose, you would have to talk to our art department, and the rose wrangler, his name is Jay-Z. Really is. He is Jay-Z. The second question, Fireman Sam. If you look at the Hot Fireman of Australia calendar 2016, Sam is Mr. May. He is 6'6", so charming, so smart, so lovely, so kind. Georgia wasn't into him. I don't know, but he lives in Perth. So my advice, find the ladies from Perth, buy a cat, get it stuck in a tree, call Sam, see what happens. Come on, last one. Make it fair, boys and girls. Go. Mic number 2. Oh, he's serious.
I'm Chris from Newcastle,
G'day.
and I have one question. So first of all, thanks for sharing your story, because it's not easy to come out with a lot of stuff. Secondly, for research purposes, exactly how many drugs have you done?
Chris, I appreciate that. Firstly, I would never, and I'm glad you used the word coming out, because that's the closest thing I can describe it as, is that once you do disclose, you're kind of out, and you then, if I were to ever have a melt, if things were to go well again, and people publicly see that I got sick again, that would be, what would that then say for my doctors and other people who are suffering? So it's a big risk to do so, but I felt it was very important to talk about. When it comes to drugs, no, it's fine. Chris, I've worked in the music industry since 1992. I toured with The Big Day Out for 7 years in a row. I travelled the world with a AAA laminate around my neck for a long time, and I was a part of the highest rating TV show in the history of our country for 7 straight years. There were a lot of after parties. You do the maths. I never injected anything. There you go.
Another round of applause for Osher, everybody.
That's it?
Yes, we do have something for you.
Oh, what have you got? Oh! You didn't say the line. You got to say the line.
Osher, I've never watched The Bachelor.
Oh my God,
Wait. Here we go. All right.
This is the greatest thing
Wait.
that's ever happened.
All right. You do the thing, and we'll stand here. Wait. You do it. Hang on. Do your thinking face.
There's 2 bachelors here.
Jeez, I really had a good time on the single date. I hope she picks me.
Osher, will you accept
Wait
this rose?
wait till I get here. Okay.
Will you accept this rose?
Yes, of course I'll accept this rose. There you go. Hi. Lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Hey,
What's your name?
Eliza.
Eliza, everybody! I grab that up off you. Thanks, Eliza. Have a great show.
Thank you.
There you go, Joel.
Thanks, Ash.
No worries, man. Bye.